Hey everyone, welcome back to Rules of Engagement. We're going to jump into now a Zerg section. It's going to be Roro versus Crank, about how you can sometimes take the easy way out in a matchup. Or in almost any, it can be any matchup, any situation, how there's often an easy way out. So there's three important steps to being able to take these easy way out victories. The first step is you're going through a game, your opponent's doing a certain build, you find a counter that to your opponent's strategy. Then you execute your counter strategy. Like you say, okay, I'm going to do this against this, and I'm execute it. But the most important thing to keep in mind is that if an easier counter strategy comes about because of just the way the game's going about, you need to be able to be flexible enough in your mind, just go ahead and take it. Feel free to just completely change your gameplay if all of a sudden an easy solution for a victory comes about. Let me explain how Roro does this versus Crank. So right here, we're going to talk about basically the way the game sets up. So the first part, as we're looking through Roro's viewpoint, Crank is just doing a basic 2-base Colossus timing. Roro's lucky enough to get a couple he sneaks him in. He invests in a couple extra Zerglings early to get some nice stat information done. So as we talk about basically the way this is going to scout it, we got to talk about right now. So Crank is going for a 2-base immortal timing, right? Roro knows this. He's already, he can tell us the one overload right here, can pretty much see everything. And this is usually true. A Protoss really almost never hides this build. This is the party build. I mentioned how you can go for like a scouting, or you can go for like a really fine-tuned timing build. Crank's doing really fine-tuned timing builds. When you fine-tune a build so much that it's super streamlined, it usually becomes pretty easy to scout, just because there's certain things you can look for. So Roro knows exactly what's happening. And now he's thinking, what's the counter to my strategy? He's going for timing. Well, the most obvious timing is I should counter it by slowing it down to interfere with the perfect timing he wants to do. So as we go through this, we're going to say, okay, now that's my plan to counter down. How can I do this? Well, first I'm going to make a whole bunch of speedlings to slow it down initially. So we can see there, a group of speedlings being built. And he's building them, he started them at 9-minute mark, so they'd be across the map and get ready to intercept the Protoss army that's moving out. Normally this push moves out to like the 9:40, 9:45 mark. And if the Protoss pushes out at that time with just a few sentries and immortals, all of a sudden this Zergling force can be very, very, very scary to an army like this. We can see Crank is trying to push out here. Crank sees the speedings, is like, oh god, maybe I shouldn't push out here. I'm going to back up just a tiny bit. No, wait a minute, I'll be bold, I'll push out anyway. So he's kind of lucky a little bit there that Roro didn't jump on him. So that was Roro's plan, was to slow it down. But even though he didn't get to jump on this army, and Crank's able to sneak around the map and get to a spot where he can meet up with warp and reinforcements, he's able to get one sentry killer, so not too bad. The idea here is that he had to turn around, and all this is doing is just buying time to get his roaches out, which is his second. His plan to counter this is, I'll get speedings to slow down the push, and then I'll get roaches and just crush it, right? Pretty straightforward, right? You sting him with a little bit of a whip every once in a while, then they get frustrated, you hit him with the hammer. So that's the idea of the roaches. Buy time to get sufficient roaches out on the map. And now as he's going to kind of cross around the map, he's just going to be running around with units. And you see how he's splitting up into two different forces? This is just to try to get the Protoss units out of position. When the Zealots are distracted, the roaches can come in here and get some decent engagements. And he's coming in here and great force fields, so he just backs away. He doesn't wash his guys up against the force field. He says, you know what? You trapped a whole lot of Zerglings. You look at this jagged formation. If a Protoss wants to both keep Zerglings and roaches out, they typically have to do some type of jagged formation like that. So he's burning a lot of force fields. That's fine. I'll just back away, even use Burrow to stay safe from these Zealots and keep the different threat distance. Again, he's going to just fade out a few more force fields and retreat again as necessary, meanwhile building more and more and more roaches. But on the other hand, Crank's still building up a lot of units of his own. He's got these pylons up here. He's able to get a bunch of immortals. And this whole time, we're all trading from two directions, but Crank's still building up a decent amount of forces. So an important thing here is to notice the way that Roro has kept roughly half his army on each side of Crank's army. This is something that's hard to do, but it's very, very important to try to get your units spread out like this so you can attack from multiple angles if you need be, cut off reinforcements, and importantly, kill the pylons that come in. Of course, here, he says, you know what, he doesn't need pylons. He's got one here and finishing up here. I'd rather run past this last pylon. But earlier on, why not kill them, interfere with this food? And of course, because of all those engagements earlier, there's not quite enough force fields out, and Roro's able to do okay here. He's killing a decent number of sentries. Of course, he's losing a lot of units as well. Crank, of course, being a world-class Protoss, had an excellent set of force fields there, really minimizing the damage those roaches could do. But now Roro's thinking, okay, My initial plan was to slow down this timing push and absolutely crush it by hitting from multiple sides. But now you know what? I'm in a situation where I'm ahead in economy and army size at this point, right? Roro's ahead in economy and army size. We can look here. He's got more economy, 64 workers to 47. We look at army size. He's ahead. Actually, the army sizes are pretty close. If you add up both, the army in value is pretty close. But if you look at just total amount of food, he looks like he's ahead, but that's because it's roaches. So he's ahead in economy. He's slightly ahead in army size, but he's behind in tech. This has roaches and speedlings versus sentries and immortals. And he can't improve his army as fast as Crank can. Because even though he can produce more units because he has more economy, his units are of lower quality, and he only has 40 more food to play around with. He's at 160 food right here. So he only has a little bit of food to play around with, and of course, even though he can produce more units, as the armies scale up, Crank's army gets stronger and stronger and stronger. I'm sure there's plenty of Zergs in the audience, or players in the audience who've either been in this Roro situation, or at least have seen it in professional level games where it looks like the Zerg is doing okay, but the Protoss just keeps warping in units. The army gets big, and even though they've been on 2 bases, at the 15-minute mark, all of a sudden they have this 200 food army of Sentry Immortal, and the Zerg has 4,000 resources in the bank, but just can't do anything because all they have is roaches and speedlings. So it's an easy situation to be in. Roro knows he's in that situation. Right now he's ahead, but he'll easily become behind if he doesn't do anything, because Crank's army is going to be so difficult to beat with the amount of tech he's at. So, now this is the point where Roro has to say, you know what? Right now he can't attack, he's low on force fields. Right now is when I want to initiate something. But you know what, I can't. He's in this nice choke, he's warping in guys. I have to, since I lost most of my flanking force, I have to get these guys now to the flank and remake guys here. But if I'm doing that and all of a sudden he attacks my third before I'm ready, I could get caught with my roaches trying to position over here. So he's not really in a great position. His initial counter to the strategy isn't working out that well, right? He had his plan, he had his counter, but it hasn't worked out. It's worked out okay. I mean, he hasn't died, but it hasn't worked out as great as he'd like it to. So this is where he needs to take an easier counter when it comes up. And so he's like, you know what I'm going to do? I have a lot of extra money with my economy, plenty of extra minerals. I'm going to use that economy to mass a ton of defenses. And then I can use my army to counter. This is the way I can use my army size. He may be in a position where I can't attack him very well. He may be able to trade efficiently. But I can use all my money to mass these defenses. And then I can use my army to counter. And this way I avoid engaging Crank's tech-heavy army. And what can he do? Right? I have enough units here that he has to be... You know, he can't just charge blindly into me. I can just give up this third base. And then I'll just kill him. And it's just like there's no way I can lose, right? Why bother trying to do my original counter plan of just crushing his army when there's a risk that his army crushes me and I lose the game? Instead, all I have to do is just build spine crawlers, delay until I can get those up, and then I just win, right? I mean, there's no way Crank can win the game from here, right? This is an absolute checkmate position. The roaches are going to kill everything here. There's no way Crank can warp enough units to beat 21 roaches, right? And there's no way Crank can break through this spine core force with roach support either. So Roro took a position where he had a counter, and it might have worked. He might have been able to just overrun the Protoss army, especially he had tunneling claws now, so he probably could have brought on the force fields. He might have been able to beat the army. In fact, yeah, I would say he was maybe 70 to 80% likely to win the game with this rate of engagement. But if an easier counter comes up, take the easy way out, right? I mean, Crank has to make an attempt to try to break this, but there's no way this is going to work, and I think Crank's going to realize it pretty soon. Meanwhile, of course, Roro's coming up here. He's killed the Psi Core and the robotics, so Crank can even make good units. He's quickly going to deactivate all the gateways. Crank realizes his situation is unwinnable, types EG and gets out. So the whole idea of this here is that we had a situation where Roro saw his opponent's timing. He had a counter. I'm going to slow the timing down and then try to crush it with roaches from every side. The counter kind of worked, it kind of didn't, right? I mean, it was, maybe you could say Roro had a moderate advantage in that game, but not a game-ending advantage. But what he found himself in this position where all of a sudden he could just take a free win. Like, oh, just base trade and I can't lose, right? And this is the situation that comes up in actually a lot of games. There's a ton of pro games, and I'm sure there's a ton of your games at home, where this exact situation comes into play. You may be winning, losing, behind by a bit, even, I mean, you won't be drastically winning or losing, but you may be in somewhere that range where, like, you're behind by a little bit, you're ahead by a little bit, but you also have a way to get a free win. And it just the weird way that Unistar position and the way the game's played out has given you that way, and it's just up to you to see it and take it. And it's exactly what Roro did here, with saying, oh, you know what? Why should I even engage his armor? Why don't I just kill him and make a bunch of spine crawlers? Or it could be you as a Protoss player realizing, oh wait, I have all these bases, I can just kill the Zerg player's buildings instead of engaging the Broodlords. And then meanwhile, I just hide 2 Stargates on the corner of the map, and make some Void Rays, and those can kill the Broodlords without a problem. Or you know, there's a lot of situations. It could be Zerg players saying, oh, I have Muteless, I'm just going to base trade instead of trying to defend. We saw some of those in the hardest form show matches. TT1 was doing these immortal timings, and the Zerg players he played could have won every game with the base trade. But they're like, instead they tried to fight, you know, the Sentry Stalker push, Sentry Stalker Mortal push with Mutilus, and didn't quite work out. So the important thing here is you have your counter, you try it, but keep your eyes open so that if an easier counter comes your way, you can take that, and then you need to take the easy way out, right? If you have a free win, don't think, oh, it's a little bit cheesy. Think, thank you for, you know, you should thank yourself for having the mental capability to recognize you had that easy way out. Take it, grab your win, put a smile on your face, and proceed to the next game. Thank you guys for watching this segment of Rules of Engagement. We'll take a break and be right back with a question and answer period.